The Dave LewAllen Podcast is sponsored by Sherm's Candy, a Michigan based company that specializes in awesome tasting candy that's in the shape of Michigan. And welcome back to the Dave LewAllen Podcast. We cover sports stories, newsmakers, and difference makers in our community and across the state of Michigan. So pleased to have you with us on YouTube or your favorite source of podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. We're there and hope we become one of your favorites moving forward as well. It is my pleasure today to have on this episode of the Dave LewAllen Podcast Ryan Hertz. He is the CEO of Lighthouse, a nonprofit based in Pontiac, Michigan, providing emergency shelter services, food assistance, and more, expanding their mission with a campus expansion planned over the coming months and years. Ryan Hertz joining us today. Ryan, thank you for the time, and tell me more and our viewers and listeners about Lighthouse and your mission.
Certainly. Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Lighthouse, Michigan is the result of a merger that took place in 2019 of two longstanding human service and community development organizations based in Oakland County. One called Lighthouse of Oakland County and the other called South Oakland Shelter. Both were founded to respond to emergency needs in the community. South Oakland Shelter as an emergency shelter provider for families and individuals experiencing homelessness. And Lighthouse was originally founded as a food pantry in the 1970s. And both organizations expanded their scope of services over many years and eventually found themselves as affordable housing developers. In 2019, South Oakland Shelter was set to break ground on our first affordable housing development, and Lighthouse of Oakland County was looking for opportunities and partnerships also in that space, and a discussion about partnering on a housing development opportunity led to a merger of the two organizations and a new mission focused on building equitable communities to alleviate poverty. And so the way that we do that is both through responding to the emergency needs that folks have in our community, like emergency food, shelter, utility assistance, and more, engaging those individuals with stability services to focus on long-term economic stability and hopefully the ability to be self-sustaining without need for accessing emergency services longer term. And then we also focus on the environmental aspects that contribute to poverty in our community. So despite the fact that Oakland County is collectively a very well-off community, the more high-income jobs that you create in your community, you're actually creating the need for more low to mid-income workers to support that local economy. And so when communities plan appropriately for that, it looks very different than when you have low to mid-income workers without accessible housing, without the ability to get to and from work sustainably, et cetera. And in fact, it affects all of us, and it especially affects the low to mid-income workers in our communities. So our focus now is broad. Our long-term focus is environmental. How do we create communities that provide opportunities for everybody across the economic spectrum to thrive? And we also ebb and flow, depending on circumstances and needs, around emergency services, predominantly around shelter and food.
Well, let's talk about shelter first and the need. How great is it? Because as part of your expansion, you're talking about increasing the ability to shelter, right? Homeless, disadvantaged individuals, also youths, runaways, etc. How great is the need in that area, sheltering?
It's a great question. So in the shelter space, we've really changed our approach over the years. So South Oakland Shelter, when it was founded as an emergency shelter, was founded by the faith community in Southern Oakland County, and it actually was hosted at the congregations themselves. So for decades, what started as a partnership between 6 churches and expanded to multi-denominations and eventually multi-faith initiatives became a year-round program that would move every week to a different congregation facility. And our job at SOS over the years was to coordinate that, provide case management to those individuals, provide support to the volunteers in the congregations, have a daytime office and other resources for the clients of the shelter program. When we did that, it was a blend of individuals and families, and we would just serve first come, first serve. If there was room, we would take in a family. If there wasn't, and an individual needed shelter, we'd take them in. And there were a lot of advantages to approaching things that way. One of the big ones is that we never had to address the issue of building a standalone shelter, the cost of that, the possible pushback from neighbors, et cetera. And the second was that we got to leverage the generosity of a wonderful faith community in Southern Oakland County. Another great advantage is that it meant that the problem was not invisible to people, because folks across the community were having real human interactions with people experiencing homelessness, breaking bread together in their congregation, social halls, et cetera. The disadvantages, as you might imagine, are that you're talking about individuals and families who are already experiencing significant disruption in their lives. Right. And so the burden on them to have to move every week to another location, to be in a mass shelter environment or in a congregate environment, where they're not just dealing with the trauma and stress on their household of being displaced, but also interacting with other households who are displaced in close quarters, a whole rotating cast of volunteers, different folks every week, every night. It could be very distracting for individuals and families who we want to see focused on their next steps. What are we going to do next? And it sort of compounds what's already a somewhat disruptive and traumatic experience for folks, to say the least. The other disadvantage is space. The congregations that we work with typically had a limit of roughly 30 individuals in however many households that we'd be able to host at any given time. We didn't really want to go much past that, because even in a larger congregation, we don't have to put somebody out at the end of the week. So that was really limiting. And it meant that we weren't able to meet even close to the amount of need in the community for emergency shelter. So the first time we were ever really equipped to do this right, we were sort of forced into it by COVID-19. So when the pandemic happened, we immediately had to stop our rotating shelter program, because most of our volunteers had been volunteering with us since we were founded in 1985, and we're amongst some of the most high-risk folks. This is, of course, well before vaccines were available. And similarly, our clients were very vulnerable. People with health challenges, people without access to adequate preventative and other healthcare resources. So we had to stop rotating. For a brief period, we brought the shelter into the community room in our headquarters, and we didn't take any intakes because we didn't want to threaten the health and well-being of the folks that were in the program, until we could figure out a long-term plan. And so we started a fundraiser for what we thought would be a few weeks we didn't know how long this pandemic thing was going to happen. So we started thinking we needed to raise $25,000 to maybe rent some hotel rooms for a few weeks until things blow over and we could go back to our rotating shelter program. That obviously was not in the cards. But within the first 3 months of the pandemic, we were actually able to raise about $3 million, which was just sort of an avalanche. So, the day after we posted our campaign online to raise $25,000, I got a call from the CEO, our friends at United Way, asking what they could do to help, and they pledged $50,000 towards the campaign. We made it a match to 100. Within a few days, we had our next match secured, and we'd already reached the 100, and it just kept going. And so between our shelter response and also dramatically escalating our food distribution during that time, we spent through that money within about a year and a half. And the way we did it was mostly through hoteling. So renting hotel rooms is not an inexpensive way to provide emergency shelter, but we learned a lot. Giving people the dignity of their own room, having the resources to quadruple the number of individuals that we're serving on any given night, being able to have families have their own space, and the children of those families being able to have their parents control their environment a little bit more. we saw stronger outcomes. We saw happier people. We saw a level of dignity that we had not been able to provide to people historically. And we said, we want to keep doing that. And we want to do it at the scale that our community needs. In 2023, we also took on all of the operations of the runaway and homeless youth programs in Oakland County that were previously operated by Common Ground. So the Sanctuary program, a Step Forward, and a GAP program, all geared towards unaccompanied youth ages 10 to 17 and youth aging out of foster care ages 18 to 24. And so we realized at a certain point that we don't have the resources to serve all the needs of the entire broad population, and it's not our role to meet all needs for all people. And we really zeroed in on how do we ensure that folks who are experiencing homelessness and the most vulnerable folks in those households have the least disruptive experience possible and a brighter future. And for us, that's really youth. And so our emergency shelter now only serves families with children. Mm-hmm. We work with other partners when it comes to referrals for individual adults who need shelter. And we do still provide housing to individual adults and many other services to individual adults. But our shelter environment is now non-congregate. So every family gets their own apartment. And it's now housed on our campus currently. Between unaccompanied youth and youth that are in displaced families that are homeless, our real focus is how do we create a brighter future so that the children in these households aren't coming back needing shelter services and other supports later. So our campus project is an attempt to roughly triple the number of beds for families with children.
And let's get into that a little bit. It's as I understand it, a $40 million expansion campaign for your Pontiac campus, with the sheltering aspect certainly an important part of that. How many more individuals or families will you be able to house there on an emergency basis once the campaign, the construction is complete? And what else is part of this campaign to expand your campus in terms of services that Lighthouse will provide?
Certainly. So the Lighting the Way campaign is a fairly comprehensive approach to poverty alleviation for our community. It includes the redevelopment of our headquarters and campus on Woodward on the Loop in Pontiac. And actually, this is the view out my office window here. You can see Woodward behind me. And folks, when you're coming into the Loop into Pontiac, you might recognize our iconic inland lighthouse that we have here that makes sure that boats don't crash into the office. So that is the footprint, right? So it's that first block where our offices are, and the block behind it where we have some single family homes, duplexes, and our family shelter building. Roughly 3/4 of the money we're raising is specifically for capital improvements to that location, to that 2-block area. And that includes a number of things, including roughly tripling the number of shelter beds in apartments for families in our community. It includes amenities and office space for the staff for that shelter program. It includes a dining center and commercial kitchen specifically for the shelter program, so that the congregations that used to host our rotating shelter program at SOS can come on site and do similar activities and have the resources and facilities necessary to do so. It includes a bunch of other amenities for the families and youth in the shelter program. And our hope is, if we're able to raise enough, it would include space to expand our runaway and homeless youth programs on 2 of the floors of one of the new buildings. And what that would mean is continuing to serve. We have our runaway homeless youth programs headquartered in Royal Oak, continuing to serve one of the programs there with a larger number of people, and moving one of the programs up onto the campus. In addition to that, this includes the construction of a new social supermarket facility. So throughout the pandemic, we dramatically increased the number of food boxes that we distribute to people throughout Oakland County, both through satellite sites in northern Oakland County and Clarkston, and in southern Oakland County and Southfield. And those are currently in partnership with some of the congregations that we work with, as well as through our headquarters in Pontiac. And then we have a warehouse that we currently operate where those food boxes are sorted and packed and distributed to all those sites, and also through volunteers, they're home delivered. But our hope is to move that operation onto the campus. And when folks come to the campus, instead of just coming to pick up a box, they'll actually be able to shop for themselves at what we're calling a social supermarket. And a social supermarket is a European model that pairs a client choice food pantry with a bunch of other supportive services. So next to the client choice pantry will be what we're calling our Economic Opportunity Center, which hosts our Center for Working Families program, follow-up care program, and other supportive services for folks in our community. On the roof of the social supermarket and on the second floor of our administrative headquarters, we'll be including another commercial kitchen and an indoor-outdoor hybrid cafe and community event space, 150-person event venue for our community that'll also operate as a cafe for the folks that work on our campus, the folks that work surrounding our campus. The county will be close by doing a very large development in the middle of the loop, as well as our neighbors throughout the community. And then updates to our administrative offices, as well as for some of the spaces for our tenants. So in addition to Lighthouse's programs, we also have a Head Start program operated by OLSA on our campus. We have a federally qualified health clinic called the Wellness Plan that operates on our campus. And we have a workforce development organization called Community Employment Opportunities that also operates on our campus. So all of that investment of $30 million into the campus is going to really create a hub for the hub and spoke model in which we serve throughout Oakland County and also the rest of Southeast Michigan. We actually have a couple projects in early stage development in Detroit now that are affordable housing projects. And beyond the campus, the rest of the capital campaign is to invest in affordable housing and community development capital, so we can develop more affordable housing and create more sustainable solutions to the issues our families face across our community, as well as expansion for program dollars and other capacities and investments in some of our other sites. So it's a $40 million lift overall, with about 3/4 going into our campus.
Yeah, amazing campaign and mission and the expanded services. Ryan Hertz, CEO of Lighthouse, Michigan, joining us today on the Dave LewAllen Podcast. I want to take just a moment to remind you that this podcast is sponsored by Sherm's Candy. And we tell you that it's easy this Christmas to put a smile on the face of this Christmas with a taste of Michigan. Sherm's Candy offers delicious candies, all playfully shaped with the Mitten State itself. Their products include classic Misha gummies, a delightful taste of gummy goodness, perfect for any candy lover. Decadent chocolate Misha gummies. Indulge someone special with a chocolatey experience this holiday season. Tart and tangy sour Misha gummies. Pucker up for a stocking stuffer that will leave a lasting impression. Sherm's Candy doesn't forget about furry friends either. Misha Pups are a tasty treat made just for dogs, ensuring everyone gets a Christmas treat. Find Sherm's Candy at many fine retailers across Michigan or order online at shermscandy.com for a unique and delightful Christmas gift. Happy to have Sherm's Candy on board as a sponsor of the Dave LewAllen Podcast. On this episode, we're talking with Ryan Hertz, the CEO of Lighthouse, about their major campaign to expand their campus in Pontiac and expand services as well. Ryan, you mentioned the affordable housing aspect of this. Housing is a problem, especially with inflation that we've seen, mortgage rates that we've seen, just the lack of affordable housing in many communities as well. That's a big thing to take on, though, but you're doing that at Lighthouse, as you mentioned, in your immediate service area, if you will, around the headquarters in Pontiac, but you mentioned even Detroit now and elsewhere. How are you going about this? That certainly takes a lot of money and resources to make happen.
It does. Thankfully, the resources that we're looking to raise for our Affordable Housing and Community Development Capital Fund would be highly leveraged. So we utilize, it's a multifaceted strategy, but the bulk of our housing units are affordable rental units and multifamily developments. financed through the low-income housing tax credit program, which is a little bit of um, I think, a marketing misstep on behalf of the federal government when they called it the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program, because the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program can be used to finance housing at, up to 80% of the area median income. And in Oakland County, 60%, 80% units are for sometimes middle-class families. And so, our desire is to impact the entire housing ecosystem. We know more housing units means more affordability. And, our sweet spot is anything from supportive housing for people with disabilities all the way up to 60% or 80% of the area median income, depending on the program and the needs of that location. So most of our units are, as I said, multifamily rental. We also do some single family housing, both rental and homeownership programs. And we're doing a lot of different experimental approaches to that, including shared equity housing approaches. But the bulk of the resources are investments in the pre-development costs associated with low-income housing tax credit transactions, which are reimbursed as a part of the development process. So the funds that we're trying to raise are really recyclable pool of dollars to help us invest in more projects across our area. When we first started doing this work, the concept of low-income housing tax credit developments was somewhat stigmatized, I think partially because they were called low income. Now we're at the place where the reality of our housing crisis is impacting people across the economic spectrum, and it can't be ignored. So opportunities are coming our way. Communities are desiring to work with organizations like ours to bring more affordable rental units into their communities. And it looks very different than it did even just 5 years ago when we did South Oakland Shelter's first housing development in Oak Park. So we have some close by to our campus, single family homes and duplexes. We have some multifamily developments in Pontiac, a couple that will be redeveloped, and one new build scheduled for early 2025. We have actually, now I mentioned that, we have another one that we just finished in partnership with the Pontiac Housing Commission. Our housing development in Oak Park, a couple that we're working on in Detroit, and some early stage visionary ideas in some other areas.
Speak to me about, if you would, the collaboration that takes place in the nonprofit area. You had mentioned at one point that that you may direct individuals to certain other agencies as necessary. You're based in Pontiac. There's Grace Centers of Hope, there's Haven, the Furniture Bank, who we featured here as well, providing assistance to individuals. Speak to me about, if you would, that collaboration that takes place, if it's happens frequently, if there's an opportunity for more collaboration, as you move forward with your expanded role and services. How does that work in this sector?
There isn't an easy answer to that question. I'll say I think different organizations prioritize collaboration differently. For us, collaboration is a core value it's in our strategic plan, is one of our core values. And we define that as essentially diminishing self-interest for the sake of solving community-wide problems. So there's a number of ways that we partner with a large number of partners. Sometimes when people think about our scope of work, they think of it sort of linearly, like somebody comes to us because they need food or shelter, and then that specific person signs up for a stability services program, or maybe a rental assistance program, or maybe they need shelter and then they go into one of our housing programs, and it's all this like linear continuum of our services. The reality is while there are some people where that does happen, we seek to meet needs where there's gaps in the community, regardless of where that person may be coming from or going, right? So if somebody comes into our shelter program, we work with them to find housing, regardless of who the owner or developer is of that housing, if it's the right housing for them in the right community. Similarly, other shelters, both locally and from further away, who refer people into our housing programs. People who aren't homeless get referred into our housing even more frequently. And so the way we really collaborate is just to make sure that folks know what resources we have available, that we know what resources are available, that our caseworkers and our direct service folks are working with in an open way and in a transparent way with the rest of the community. An example of that is we have a housing registry in Oakland County. So when people want access to certain types of housing resources that we have, we don't just pick up the phone, answer it, and say, "Oh yeah, no problem." We have a community registry that says everybody who needs these services has been assessed, and they'll be assigned out to available units, not just ours, but all of the partners that are part of our continuum of care, based on need, right? And based on how the acuity of the situation, and the applicability and eligibility of particular units. So, sometimes collaboration can be very deep in that sense, where people are meeting on a regular basis as a group to try to figure out solutions for individuals across the community with a wide range of resources. And sometimes it's as simple as, a caseworker saying, "Oh, you have this particular need," picking up the phone and calling caseworker at the, let's say, Furniture Bank or another location and saying, "I've got somebody who needs your help." So it's a little bit all over the map. And for us, it's a core value, and we seek to do it as much as we can. We view ourselves as generalists. If you think about human services almost in a medical model, we're like your general physician you might go to just for your normal checkup, and then there's specialists that we work with throughout the community, right? So we're focused on poverty more broadly. We don't only target food or only target housing, et cetera, but we partner closely with those who do, and we try to solve problems for people together.
And it's important and necessary work, to be sure. You have a staff. I'm sure it's mighty, but nonprofits also depend on volunteers and support in that way. If someone watching or listening to us today says, "That's a mission that speaks to me," how do people get involved with Lighthouse, either through financial support or volunteering? What opportunities are there for that? I'm guessing certainly you encourage both.
Of course, yeah, and usually it's not one or the other. I'll say this: both South Oakland Shelter and Lighthouse of Oakland County, that kind of make up the core of who we've become, as well as the sanctuary and runaway homeless youth programs, were really all started by volunteers in the community looking to solve social issues that weren't being otherwise addressed. And I view my role as a steward of an institution that's really just a conduit for our community's giving spirit and desire to ensure that nobody goes without, both in the present and to build an equitable community where people don't need to rely on a food pantry to feed their children, right? So we take that responsibility seriously. We do have a mighty staff, but it takes a whole army of volunteers and donors and partnering institutions to do our job well. The best way to learn more about how to get involved with us is probably through our website. And you can find us at lighthousemi.org. Lighthouse, MI is in Michigan.org. And you can also follow us on social media, and that's a great way to just stay in the loop on opportunities as they arise.
Is there an entry point, or something that, hey, if I want to learn more, I want to get involved, I want to get kind of, put a toe in the water, if you will. What's the best way for someone to get involved?
There is. Usually the best first point of access is our website. We do have volunteer opportunities and sign up opportunities for volunteer activities listed there. Points of contact for different programs, opportunities both to donate and also to hold anything from a food drive at your place of business to other group activities. So there's countless ways to be a part of our mission. Um, the best way I think for folks to get most familiar with us is to visit lighthousemi.org, review the material there. Hopefully, it's fairly self-explanatory. We did just roll out an AI assistant that'll pop up on the screen at the bottom if you have questions that aren't readily apparent for you.
Saw that this morning.
What was that?
I saw your AI assistant this morning.
Yeah, yeah. I think his name is Watson. But yeah, so yeah, we are doing our best with our limited resources and in some cases limited staff. I guess we just ask people to be patient with us because we're taking an unbelievable amount of calls and other correspondence, not only from people looking to volunteer and support financially, but also and even more so from people looking for resources in the community who have high needs. And our staff are stretched really thin. So electronic communication is usually best because we can get back to you usually in a more timely manner. Yeah, we hope to hear from your audience. That's what we're here for.
Ryan Hertz, the CEO of Lighthouse Michigan, joining us this episode of the Dave LewAllen Podcast, which is sponsored by Sherm's Candy. Put a smile on faces this Christmas with a taste of Michigan. Sherm's Candy offers delicious candies, all playfully shaped like the Mitten State itself. Products include classic Michigummies, decadent chocolate Michigummies, tart and tangy sour Michigummies. Sherm's Candy doesn't forget about your furry friends either. Misha Pups are a tasty treat made just for dogs, ensuring everyone gets a Christmas treat. Find Sherm's Candy at many fine retailers across the state of Michigan or at shermscandy.com for a unique and delightful Christmas gift. As we wrap with Ryan Hertz, the president, CEO of Lighthouse Michigan, we've talked about support and how people can volunteer. As you look at 2025, though, Ryan, which is just around the corner now, if you had to say these are our top 3 goals, the things on our to-do list that are most important to us, what would that be?
Well, that's very clear for me. We have almost $150 million in real estate development that we're set to break ground on within the first 3 to 4 months of the year. And in order to make that happen, a handful of things have to go right. And if they do, it's going to be transformational for the people that we serve and the families and the children that we serve. One is success in the Lighting the Way campaign. So as I mentioned, there is also a link on our website to the Lighting the Way campaign for folks who want to learn more about the Lighting the Way campaign. We just had our public launch of the campaign celebration a couple weeks ago. And so folks want to learn more, please do. We aren't necessarily assuming we'll reach our $40 million goal by the first quarter of next year, but we want to hit our target so that we can break ground on the first phase of construction in the first quarter of next year. We also hope to close on and break ground on 4 different affordable housing buildings in the coming year. And in order for all those things to happen, we also just need the bread and butter annual support, right? So we're in the last month of the year. This is the year when most of our individual annual giving happens. If folks feel called by our mission to alleviate poverty, we would be honored to be a part of your end of year giving. As you might imagine, with all these individual capital projects that we're working on, sometimes resources for just the day-to-day operations can be taxed. And so that's a really critical piece. And then the third area is really positioning the organization differently in the years ahead. So while we have a lot of projects we're working to wrap up that have been years in the making, our other goal is to think differently about the landscape that we face as a community and that the people that we serve face as a community, and make sure that we're not just trying to continue to repeat whatever model seemed to work just a couple of years ago, but that we're able to continue to adapt, continue to collaborate, continue to find the right partners to forward our mission. And so we're really grateful for how far we've come so far. And I think we're at almost 15 million raised for the Lighting the Way campaign already. And a lot of folks have shown a lot of interest in what we're trying to accomplish. And I guess I'll just ask your listeners to really think about and prioritize the needs of some of the most vulnerable people in our community when thinking about charitable giving at the end of this year.
And we wish you all the best with that campaign and the success going forward. And hopefully many more will want to join the mission as well. Ryan, thank you for the time today. We appreciate that, and also the work that you do with your team at Lighthouse, Michigan, in serving others. I thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Ryan Hertz, the president CEO of Lighthouse, Michigan, joining us on this episode of the Dave LewAllen Podcast. As always, we thank you for watching, listening. Please, if you've enjoyed the conversation, please share it with a friend. Share it within your network as well so that we can grow our audience and reach more people with important messages like the one Ryan Hertz has delivered today on behalf of Lighthouse, Michigan. Thanks to producer-director Josh Bowen, but most importantly, of course, to you for watching and listening to the Dave LewAllen Podcast. Until next time, stay safe, be kind. The Dave LewAllen Podcast is sponsored by Sherm's Candy, a Michigan-based company that specializes in awesome tasting candy that's in the shape of Michigan.